The Marty and Laura Show is brought to you by Veterinary Village. With locations throughout Wisconsin, Veterinary Village is dedicated to enhancing the quality of animal and human lives today and into the future. Welcome to the Marty and Laura Show. How are you guys today? Marty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Well, it's awfully early on a Sunday. See, I can't even talk yet on a Sunday morning here in Oregon. So,
Yes, but I
um,
have those pesky appointments to see
yeah, I
today,
know. I
so
know. You're
because
working 7 days a week, so I'm just gonna
uh-huh.
run with it and do the same. So
Yep, got
today,
it.
today I believe our topic of conversation is spaying and neutering your pet. When, why, where,
Yes.
and how.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
there's some really deep stuff here because it's
there's
not
a
as
lot.
easy as it used to be. Used to be
Yeah,
simple.
yeah. So let's start with um the why are we spaying our animal or neutering our animal?
Sure. So the obvious answer is to prevent reproductive capacity.
Yes.
I mean, that seems easy to figure out, right? If you're neutered, if you're spayed, you can't have puppies. Yeah, that makes sense, right? But in addition to that, we as Americans
Yes.
have become kind of complacent and lazy about learning how to manage our pets' sexual acts and behaviors.
Mm.
So, as a result, because since the 70s, so basically for two generations of pet owners, and coming up to third pretty soon, we have been spaying and neutering so that we don't have to worry about those things. So you can have a male and a female dog in the house or in the neighborhood or in the apartment or whatever and not worry about reproductive accidents. And that becomes an issue because we have not learned, we have not handed down the tradition of how do we keep our male and female dogs from breeding to each other if that's not what we want them to do, or the behaviors that have perhaps inappropriately been assigned to some of the fact that our dogs aren't spayed or neutered. So people assume that certain behaviors are sexual when they probably are not.
Yes. And I want to kind of dig into that specific
Mhm.
marking in the house is one, aggression
Sure,
is one.
sure.
Some of those kind of things. Can you kind of break that down because I am frankly of the opinion that you're right that these things are rarely as uh, intact hormone induced as has become the popular myth.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of gets to be interesting. Um, yes, territorial marking with urine is a thing, not just for boys, but for girls too. Ian Dunbar taught us that male dogs posture in 8 different positions to mark territory with their urine, and females have 14. So, girls, we have you beat. So, females do mark territory with urine
Hmm.
as well,
Hmm.
but not typically as it's not typically as difficult to live with because it's not on upright surfaces in our homes. So if your male dog lifts his leg on a vertical surface, as you know, like a chair leg or a table leg or the corner of the door frame or whatever, yeah, that's definitely a concern. But just like any other behavior, you need to teach them not to do that. You don't let your dog walk into the kitchen, climb up on a chair, and stand in the middle of your kitchen table, I assume,
I've seen
to
a lot of
eat
people that
dinner.
do, so I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, maybe our listeners are okay with that. I have found one of my dogs doing that one day when I wasn't home. My son was in charge, and you know how that goes.
Yes.
So, yeah, that happens. But we need to train our dogs not to do that. So if your dog does it once, you're going to teach them that that's unacceptable behavior. And the same thing happens with urinary marking. Is you don't allow the dog certain behaviors, so why would you allow them to mark territory urine with urine in your house? And the answer is you teach them not to do that.
Yep.
Aggression is a really interesting topic. Aggression, fearfulness, and other similar behaviors. are kind of interesting because historically we have thought that intact male dogs are more likely to be aggressive. And in reality, that has proven not to be true. Christine Zink has a couple of really nice papers out there. If you go to Google Scholar and put in canine behavior, Christine Zink, Zink,
Mhm.
she's a veterinary pathologist and has written with Farhudi a couple of really seminal articles about the fearful behaviors, aggressive behaviors, and so forth that we have always assigned to male dogs. And it's actually not true. When we see dog fights in our practice, if it's, multiple dogs in the household or multiple dogs at a dog park or wherever it happens to be, the aggression of female on female is always worse than male
Yeah.
on male.
Yes, it is.
Males should never be aggressive toward a female, ever, 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 ever. That is dog rule number 101 is male dogs should never be aggressive toward a female. A female can be aggressive toward a male, but not vice versa. So if you have a male dog that's beating up on a female or aggressive toward a female, he's got a screw loose. Like you got big trouble and you need some behavioral counseling
You got a
really
lot more
fast.
problems than taking his testicles off.
Exactly. So, female on female behavior, especially when they're coming into heat, can be difficult. Male on male can be difficult, but the girls are always meaner to the girls than the boys are to the boys. So, just as a basic foundation. And if you have two male dogs, one is neutered and one is intact, and they can see each other at 400 yards, they can tell what
Mhm.
their sexual status is. It's almost always the male dog that's neutered that's aggressive toward the intact male. He always makes the first move because he feels like he's got the lower positions, lower status, and so he's going to be the one who makes the first move to try to gain that status. So status versus dominance, I mean, there's some language differences here that we need
Right.
to work through, but those are some important things to realize is if you have a neutered male dog and you're at the dog park and an intact male walks up to you, you need to be in control of that dog because you could have your male dog starting the fight, not the other way around.
Right. Okay. So that's a discussion about why. And I think it's an
Hmm.
interesting note when we look outside our own backyard and look at dogs around the world. Uh, Altering pets is not a thing in Europe
No,
or other
no.
places.
No, they don't routinely spay and neuter dogs in the European countries, and they don't have a pet overpopulation problem. They don't have a mixed breed overpopulation problem. So when I've traveled in Europe and go places on the train or go to a restaurant or a cafe or whatever, and there's dogs there, they're intact dogs and they know how to behave themselves because they've been trained to go out in public and behave. So it's a whole different experience, and they don't have oodles of puppies pouring out of shelters and rescues because they have inappropriately bred dogs. So I think we really need to take a hard look at ourselves as Americans to say, what have we, where have we gone awry and what have we done wrong here? And what do we need to do to regain that? Because there's some really important information that we'll get into about the improvement in health and longevity by keeping our dogs intact.
Yes, that's our next step. So now we're at the decision of yes or no. We've decided why. When?
When is a really hard question to answer. We used to say, oh, that's easy. At 6 months, they're close to being mature. They haven't come in heat yet. They're not, they haven't gone through puberty yet as a male dog. So let's just, remove their sexual organs at 6 months and we'll be great. It doesn't really work as easily as that. There have been rescue organizations and other groups that have started doing spaying and neutering incredibly young dogs and cats, incredibly young. I've heard reports, I've not actually seen it, but some where there have been reports of that happening even before their eyes are open, so under 2 weeks of age. So that's to me, yeah, I know that's kind of horrifying to me as well. So at least at 6 months, we have some long-standing idea of what it does sexually and to other organs in the body to our pets. And the problem is that our ovaries and testicles don't just affect the ovaries and testicles and the prostate and the uterus. Every organ in your body has receptors on it for estrogen, for progesterone, testosterone, all those things. So just it's not as simple as you just took out that one organ. You have affected the entire axis from the pituitary to the adrenals to the pancreas to the growth hormones to all the stuff. And so it's not as easy as just saying, well, it's no big deal. We just took out the ovaries, or it's no big deal. We just removed the testicles. It is a big deal because now we've impacted all the other organs. So age is no longer as easy as it used to be. Now we are starting to say things like, well, let's push back to at least where they are skeletally mature. So for some breeds of dogs, that's going to be 15 to 18 months before their growth plates close. The bigger the breed, the more giant breeds have a later growth plate closure than our smaller breeds. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to look at some of the other studies that show maybe it's age 4, maybe it's age 5. We don't really know because we don't have enough data collected yet, but it is hard. A lot of people are hard at work trying to determine what the most appropriate age is. But right now, it's in my mind, it is not 6 months of age.
Can you talk a little bit? I know there have been a couple relatively, I won't say conclusive, but really strong studies indicating that the age of spay or neuter impacts different cancers and other long-term health consequences, cruciate ligaments, that sort of thing.
Sure. So if we look at cancer first, you have been preached to by your veterinarian since the 1970s that your dog will have less cancer if she or he is spayed or neutered. And actually, that's false. That is not true. If you start looking at some of the articles that are published, and again, you don't have to be a veterinarian to find these articles, but
And we'll
there's
link
an
some in the
article.
show notes.
Oh, yeah. So Benjamin and Lynn Hart did a retrospective study. They're professor emeritus at UC Davis, and they went back through old UC Davis records, and they have an article on decision making on 35 breeds of dogs based on skeletal decisions. So they have that article. The Vizslas have a study, the Rottweilers have a study, the Goldens and the Labs have information. So there's a lot of good information out there if you start looking for it. And like Laura said, we'll have these links to the articles so you don't have to frantically try to write this down and figure out how to Google it and all that stuff. But I think it's really important that you know that that is not accurate. You do protect the boys against testicular cancer. Well, testicular cancer is easy to diagnose because you can diagnose it with your hand. If you feel a nodule and one testicle is bigger than the other and your dog is aging, then you should probably have it checked out. Testicular cancer in dogs is almost never fatal. I have never seen it damage a dog seriously. And I've had one client tell me that her dog lost a kidney over it. That is the worst thing that I've ever heard about testicular cancer. In the human, of course, testicular cancer is a big deal. So I'm not minimizing that, but that's the case. And cats, we always neuter boy cats because they are impossible to live with. So I don't know if I know I've never seen testicular cancer in a male cat because they always come to us neutered. On the female side, there was a study done that showed there was an increased risk of mammary cancer, breast cancer in females that had been spayed after age 6 months and after age 2. And indeed, that is the case. We do see an increase in mammary cancer. I have never seen mammary cancer in a male dog, and I've never seen it in a spayed female dog if she was spayed young. However, again, mammary cancer is easy to diagnose. You diagnose it with your fingers. So once a month, when you do your little self breast exam, then you do your dogs. You go up and down her mammary chain. When you bathe her, when you do her nails, when you groom her, when you're hanging out in on the couch with her, just up and down the glands. And if you find a nodule, we take it off. I have in 43 years of practice seen 10 dogs that have died of breast cancer. 10. However, when we don't spay and neuter, we protect our dogs against 4 kinds of cancer. And that is going to be spleen cancer, hemangiosarcoma, lymph node cancer, lymphosarcoma, osteosarcoma, bone cancer, and mast cell tumors, which is a cancer of the skin and the spleen. So when I look at that incidence, I see dogs every day in my practice, every week in my practice that have mast cell tumors, that have lymphoma, that have hemangiosarcs and osteosarcs. In the last month, I've seen 1 osteosarc, 4 hemangiosarcs, and 3 lymphomas, and 2 mast cell tumors. So don't tell me that we're protecting dogs against cancer when we're really not. Then we go back to the boys, and people are like, well, I don't want my dog to get prostate cancer. I diagnosed one of those this week, and it is more common in neutered dogs, believe it or not, than intact dogs, and that's counterintuitive. So here's the deal is if you have testicular cancer, then you remove the testicle or both. Surgically, you remove it and the dog gets cured. If they have mammary cancer, almost always, if you find it when it's small and you remove it when it's small, Almost always, like 99% of the time, these dogs are going to have a normal life expectancy. It's not the 50-50 ratio that you read in the literature. So I think it's really important that you take a good hard look at what your veterinarian's telling you, what breed you have, what lines of dogs in your line have issues, because we know that there's a certain amount of inheritance, which we do not have DNA tests for at this time, for lymphoma, for hemangiosarc, for mast cell tumors, for histiocytosis, or I'm sorry, um, malignant histiocytosis. So there's a lot of diseases that we can probably see a lower incidence of if we leave our dogs intact. So there you go. You have to go into your vet, squarely look them in the eye and say, so show me the studies that show that there is more cancer in a neutered, I'm sorry, more cancer in a spayed or, let's try it again, more cancer in intact dogs than there is in spayed and neutered dogs. And there's not documentation of that. The study on mammary cancer in the dog was done in the 1960s, and it has not been repeated. So we need some updated data. And when we do have updated data, a lot of veterinarians who are in practice are not following the new recommendations, and they don't want to believe that spaying and neutering is dangerous to pets. And in reality, I'm going to tell you that most of you probably have veterinarians that have not told you the truth.
And that's tough. I mean, changing culture.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that we're talking about here is we're now past veterinary medicine and into culture. And
Yes,
changing
we
culture
are.
is difficult, right?
We are.
Like, your intact female is going to be in season and she's going to make an unholy mess all over your house if
Well,
she isn't
sometimes,
crated or, put in little panties or the things that you
yeah,
can do. Um, I
sometimes some dogs are neat. Sometimes they're like my dogs when they're in heat. I They keep themselves clean. I don't worry about it.
I
But the
God
panties are
love
so
you, man.
cute. The panties are so cute. They have little ruffles on them. They have
Oh
little,
yeah.
now they're not a chastity belt.
I literally got a picture last night from a Spinoni friend with her Spinoni female in her little tutu.
Mhm.
I
Right.
personally do not put clothes on my dogs, so when my Spinoni bitch was in season, looked like there had been a murder in my house. So I mean,
But
there are differences
there are,
between breeds, between individuals,
there are,
and
there are.
I think everybody needs to make their own decisions, but they need to
Yes.
make them with accurate information.
Right.
Literally on Facebook last night, like this is why we have this podcast, is to prevent the uninformed gobbledygook that was in a post on a Facebook group about wire hairs and when should they neuter their
Mhm.
puppy.
Mhm.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it
And
hurts.
that's
It's like
true. And
physically painful. So
and and I
what
don't
we're
and
hoping
I
to
don't
do
want
is change that.
and I don't want to say negative things about my people in my profession, but they're holding tight to some old values that they need to let go of. They need to go back and read the new literature. When we go to the national meetings, there are overflow crowds in these meetings that are discussing this, but yet they go back into their practice, and that is the culture of the practice. That is what the practice owner, that's what all their staff has been trained to do, that's what they've been taught. And so they are holding tight to these old values, which we really need to shake loose because we have data on that. And there's also a lot of information. We see less thyroid disease, we
Mhm.
see less urinary incontinence, we see less obesity, and we know all the diseases that are linked to obesity. And most importantly, we see fewer orthopedic problems if the dogs are left intact. The orthopedic problem that concerns me most is a torn cruciate.
That's what I was just I know there's a study on this because I remember seeing it at one of our meetings that
Yes,
I was you and I were both at. So we'll
yes.
make sure we link that also.
Yes. So we know in a lot of breeds that there's an increased risk of tearing a cruciate ligament if you're spayed or neutered, especially if it's done young.
Mhm.
So here's the deal is golden retrievers, well, Labradors are 20% more likely to tear a cruciate if they're spayed or neutered. Golden retrievers are 400%, 4 times more likely to tear a cruciate. Now, how many people have golden retrievers and labs running around at the park, in their yard, all over the place where they tear a cruciate? Okay, they trot into the veterinary clinic. The vet clinic says, okay, well, I'm going to send you to a specialist or I'm going to fix it here. And it's going to be 2,500 if I fix it. It's going to be $5,000 or $6,000 if you fix it at an orthopedic surgeon. And I do recommend orthopedic surgeons because they have techniques and procedures that they can do that are superior to what a typical practitioner can do. Or if you're going to a typical practitioner, they need to be somebody that does this a lot,
Right.
not a couple times a year, a couple times a week. Okay, so
TPLO
number one,
is not for just anybody.
no, 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 no. So number one, this is $5,000 or $6,000. Number two, 50% of the dogs that tear a cruciate will within a year tear the second side. So now we're talking about a $10,000 situation. So you just decided to spay your female golden retriever when she was 6 months old, and now she tears two cruciates. So now she goes from being a 6-month-old golden retriever to being a dog with $10,000 knees. We don't do knee replacements, we do knee repairs. And then she goes on to develop lymphoma or hemangiosarcoma because she's been spayed or neutered, she or he has been spayed or neutered. And now we have a dog that has a terminal disease because we don't have good treatments for either of those neither of those diseases can be cured. Those are both fatal diseases. So now we've got a $10,000 7-year-old dog that's dying of cancer. And I don't think that's a good choice for most people.
No.
I think a couple heat cycles a year is a better choice.
Yeah. And I think two things. Number one, neither one of us is going to stand here and tell you that an intact animal is not going to get one of those cancers.
Correct. Correct. It is more
It is
likely.
simply more likely. And I think that needs to be really clearly stated. And the second part is, this is a thing. There are available decisions to be made. You can own a Basenji. They only come in season once a year. You can own a Danish Swedish farm dog that you would never know they were in season.
Seriously.
You can
I have to
choose
check
not to
really
have a
like,
big
yeah.
drippy animal on your house.
Yeah, Bernese mountain dogs are really messy when they come into heat. I'm just going to
But
tell
no
you,
need.
don't go there. Yeah, don't go there.
Doggett simplifies the puppy buying journey by connecting families with the perfect breed and responsible, health-verified breeders. They are the only breeder marketplace that verifies health clearances and responsible breeding practices. Through their personalized puppy matcher tool and matchmaker services, they educate and guide buyers every step of the way, ensuring a seamless process and a perfect match for their lifestyle. From initial breed consultation to introductions with top breeders, Doggett makes responsible puppy ownership easy and stress-free.
So we have
So,
choices, and
yes.
then we have the obesity issue, which then is linked to other kinds of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. We have urinary incontinence, which overall is reported to be 20% of female dogs, but I think it's higher than that. I think people are embarrassed to tell us that their dogs dribble urine in their bed at night and they have to sleep, but whatever. Boxers are 80% likely to get urinary incontinence after they're spayed. So we have data on certain breeds that we need to be using. And so what you need to do is take a look at what's out there. Like I said, the Vizslas have a wonderful study that was done. You can go online, you can look this stuff up. The golden retrievers, the Morris Animal Foundation has been doing the lifetime golden retriever study, and they're about 10 or 11 years into it at this point. So they're starting to release data on this breed. If you go look up the 35 breeds, decision-making 35 breeds, Benjamin and Lynn Hart, you're going to find a number of different breeds talking about slip discs and intervertebral disc disease and hip dysplasia and all the stuff that you need to educate yourself on before you make this life-changing, life-altering decision to go in and just say, oh, she's 6 months old, out they go, or he's 8 months old, boom, we're taking off his testicles because I can't hormonally put them back. We don't have good hormone replacement therapy for our dogs. So once that's done, you are done. You're stuck with that dog's hormonal status. There was a study at the Therio organization a couple of years ago that showed in lymphoma that there are receptors on every organ in your body for the cells, and your hormones from your ovaries or your testicles go up to your pituitary gland, and then it disperses all the stuff out of the pituitary gland. There's 5 different parts to it. It's all this stuff, and you have to really understand that it is not just the ovaries and it is not just the testicles. The Theriogenology organization has a white paper. If you want to reference that for your veterinarian, you go to their website, therio.org, you look up the white paper. It says your decision to spay or neuter your dog should be made on an individual basis with you as the owner and your veterinarian making decisions together. So I think those are really important aspects of how we can work with our veterinarians in our local practices to say, can we discuss what other options I have?
Good segue. because I was just gonna bring up and kind of use this to carry the conversation forward. Over what is it? Ovary sparing spay. There's a
Hmm.
term for it that
Hmm.
has become a more common conversation. So I wanted to talk about that. And is there comparable in males? And
Hmm.
how do we talk about this in cats? We already know we take the boy cats parts
Hmm.
because boy cats. Bleh.
Yeah, they spray urine, and those you cannot train your male cat or your female cat because some females spray also. So spaying and neutering cats is still really recommended. There isn't really any indication other than neutering them, the male cats when they're really little babies. There's been some orthopedic issues, some weird tibial fractures that happen in kittens that are spayed or neutered too young. So avoid that. So, you know, try to not do the, well, it's 2 pounds and 2 months old, so it's old enough for the rescue to spay or neuter. There's still risks that go with that. But cats are a whole different category because we don't see the longevity improvement in intact cats and dogs. I'm sorry, intact cats. The point is that if a female cat gets breast cancer, they are going to die from it. Cats have an entirely different kind of breast cancer, but cats hardly ever get breast cancer. So if they do have mammary cancer, it's very, 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 very bad, but I see it incredibly rarely, maybe one every 5 years. It is not common. And I'm in a busy practice. I'm in a 7 doctor practice. So it's not like I'm just twiddling my thumbs here and seeing a couple of appointments a week. I'm in a busy practice. For the alternatives, yes, there is ovary sparing spay. So the ovaries are left behind. One or both ovaries can be left behind. When that is done, you have to be very, very clear that if you're going to have your veterinarian do this, that they know how to do the procedure, because it's easy to leave ovaries, but it's very imperative that they go all the way down to the body of the uterus and beyond to take out the cervix, which means that either they do it laparoscopically or the incision is going to be a good deal longer than the typical spay incision. So
Mhm.
my spay incisions on golden retrievers, for instance, are going to be about an inch and a half long for a regular spay. But if I'm leaving ovaries, it's going to be 8 to 10 inches long because I don't do laparoscopic by personal choice. So I figure if it takes her 4 more days to recover from surgery, one time, but I bought her 2 more years because or 3 or 4 more years. And of course, you'll never know because you don't have a way to look back and figure out whether she would have gotten that kind of cancer. If I can buy her 2, 3, or 4 more years because of a 4 day longer recovery, I
Mhm.
think that's a pretty good trade off.
Mhm.
It's hard to find a veterinarian that will do the procedure or that will do it well. And most veterinarians to this point are typically bad mouthing the ovary sparing space, saying, well, that puts her at risk of stump pyometra. And yes, if you don't take all the way down to the cervix, yes, there is a risk of stump pyometra, which is a pyometra in that little bitty part of the uterus that's left behind. And it
Mhm.
can be serious. So I want it to be clear that if you're going to work with a veterinarian that hasn't done this procedure before, they need to go to the website that explains the procedure. There's a video on it. And again, we'll put a link to it. So if your vet wants to learn this, there's a link out there done by a theriogenologist, Michelle Kutzler, that they can learn how to do the procedure. That being said, a lot of veterinarians are like, nope, not learning something new, or nope, I don't believe in it, or nope, I don't want to put my name on it because I think that puts me at risk of liability. And I'm going to tell you that I've been doing it for 12 or 13 years and have had very, very, very happy clients because they're they're still okay. Like the average Rottweiler lives to be 8 years old if she's spayed. And this is data from David Waters and his Old Gray Muzzle Tour. The average female Rottweiler, if she's spayed, lives to be 8 years old. Dogs in his study that he visited in their homes, and he visited a number of them. He drove across the country in his little car, all the way to Alaska, all the way. He didn't drive to Hawaii because you can't get there by car. But he drove all over the country and he found dogs that were Rottweilers, female Rottweilers, that were dying of frailty at age 15. They finally just kind of fell apart at age 15. I had a Rottweiler here yesterday that I spared her ovaries. She came in age 7, and I was a little worried because there were some things going on. And I looked at her, and she has bladder stone. Huh. Go figure. She has a bladder stone. That isn't going to do her in. A bladder stone is manageable medically, so we're going to be able to cure her with diet and antibiotics. She doesn't have serious disease. She still has her ovaries. I'm like, yoo-hoo. this is great. Congratulations, your dog is going to be okay.
Mm.
So I think it's really important that if you are working with a veterinarian that's willing to do this, that they educate themselves appropriately before they take your dog to surgery. And it's not a hard procedure. They just need to watch the video, educate themselves. On the male side, we do vasectomies. And how many of us have guy friends in our lives or guys in our whatever that have had a vasectomy? It's it's again, it's not a hard procedure to learn. A lot of veterinarians are like, no, I'm not doing it. It's not hard to learn. I will help your veterinarian learn how to do it. And it's a simple, fast procedure. It does require anesthesia for dogs. They're not going to sit in the chair like they do with guys. So they're going to be under. Don't get excited. But it, again, gives you the option of keeping the dog hormonally intact, but
Right.
not sexually intact. So I issue a letter at the end of the procedure that I send out the door with my clients that they can send back to their breeder, back to their rescue, back to their local licensing authority so that when they pay their taxes, they get the reduced rate for spayed or neutered dogs, even though technically they're not. It has rendered them incapable of reproduction, which is the goal of rescues saying you need to spay or neuter. It's not their goal to make your dog live a shorter life expectancy. It's their goal to keep you from going out and having accidental litters of puppies. So it's simple to say, here's proof that I've done this procedure. My dog can't reproduce. And of course, you want to check with your rescue first before you do the procedure and make sure that that's acceptable to them. But I have yet to have a rescue turn us down when we have sent them a letter and said, I've taken out her uterus. No babies can form here. I've removed the vas deferens. No babies can come from the sperm because the sperm can't get out of the body. So it's all cool if you work with the rescues and are upfront with it.
Excellent. Well, I think that I personally, I that to me, this seems like the happy medium, right?
Yeah.
For people who, whatever reason, but still want their dog to be healthy. So I just wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to share with people that that was actually an option.
Yeah, and it's especially important for the performance dogs. The
Right.
dogs that are doing fast cat and agility and barn hunt and dock diving
Dog
and all that,
diving.
because those are the athletic dogs that are at greater risk of developing these orthopedic disasters
Yeah.
of torn cruciates or hip dysplasia or, whatever it happens to be. So by doing this procedure, we can protect them from injury, better protect them from injury. It doesn't protect them against everything. They're still dock diving. They're still, doing agility, but it reduces their risk of those problems. It keeps their weight down. And the thing we haven't also mentioned is coat character.
Right. Two things. What did you tell me about spay? Reduce a spay female's calories by 20%. Like the
25.
day. Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah, so the minute you have your dog spayed or neutered, you have to go home that day and cut their caloric intake by 25%. That means if you're feeding 4 cups a day to a big dog, you're feeding three. That means if you're feeding a cup a day to a little dog, you're feeding 3/4 of a cup. And they're going to look at you like cobwebs are going in their stomach, like they're going to be hungry.
I'm telling
So,
you it's the truth.
yeah.
I can speak for my own personal self and for Agatha. Agatha's completely convinced she's dying.
Yeah. So now you have to put them on a lower calorie food or a senior diet or something that appropriately feeds them so that they get the nutrition they need, but not the caloric intake that's going to make them fat because instantly they will start getting weight and they will be 25% overweight. They will be obese if you don't cut those calories and you've taken away their hormones because hormonally, that's what the difference is in these dogs that are spayed or neutered. So it's kind of surprising how fast that happens. And I mean, I had a little Bichon here yesterday that went from 9 pounds to 12 pounds. Boom. I'm like, oh boy, I think we forgot to cut down the calories. And she's like, yeah. So then we have to get, different treats and different food and different amounts of exercise and all the stuff. So there are definitely advantages. A lot of dogs with an ovary sparing spay will have minimal to no vaginal discharge. They don't always have discharge. Some still do. Most will not. The boys will still know that the girls are in heat. The girls will still know that they're in heat, and they'll still be interesting to the boys. So you want to avoid any kind of accidental mating, even though they can't get pregnant. It's safe sex is really not safe. There is a concern that a female in heat, if she has had her reproductive tract removed down to the cervix, can have a vaginal tear if she's mated by a male dog, neutered or vasectomized. So I do have clients that want to do a vasectomy on their male dog, and then an ovary sparing spay on their female, which is fine, except you still have to prevent them from safe sex because it's not that safe if she tears her vaginal vault. So we have to be careful with that. But I just think it's really important for clients to know that they have options. There's actually a Facebook page, the Ovary Sparing Spay Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
The Parmesius Foundation has a website, like I said, with Dr. Kutzler on it, showing how to do the ovary sparing spay. I don't think anybody's put up a Facebook page or a web posting of how to do a vasectomy, but I do them all the time, and I'm happy to share with other people's veterinarians how to do those. So I think it's important that you know that you have options. I've been doing this for a long time. I think I'm still the only person in the state of Wisconsin that routinely does these. So I have people that come from Chicago and Minneapolis and Indianapolis. They come from all over. I had one fly in from Texas. I'm like, really? You can't find anybody? And they're like, no. I had one drive up here from
Texas, come
Florida,
on.
literally drove from Florida to Wisconsin. Because these are people that are really committed to that type of alternative procedure. A lot of them are really highly educated medical care professionals
Mm,
who would never think of taking out ovaries or testicles on a human. And so it just makes perfect sense to them that
right,
why would you do that with a dog if you
right.
wouldn't do that with a person? Like, you don't take a 12-year-old kid and spay him and neuter him. That's not what we do in our society. That used to happen in the 1600s with eunuchs in the choirs, um, because
We've
they wanted
moved
them to
on
keep their
since then, we
voices.
hope.
We
Um,
have moved on, but
and
I
I
think it's
think,
important that we talk about those skeletal developments in llamas, in kids. If you take out their hormones, they grow taller, they grow leggier, and that's why the cruciate ruptures tear is that, or the cruciates tear is that they're structurally different. Those dogs, like a lab, will be an inch and a half or 2 inches taller than an intact litter mate because their angulation is reduced by that spaying and neutering. It changes the time that the growth plates close. They close later. They get long-legged, straighter leg. I can walk down the aisle of a humane society and pick out the tall, long, leggy black dogs that are jumping up and down on the run, that are straight, skinny-legged, back-legged dogs that do not look like regular dog. You can go to the dog park and pick them out. You can go anywhere and see these dogs. So once your eye is trained to look at that, you're going to see it happening. And then you're going to just say, oh, this makes my head hurt. Like, why, as an American society, are we continuing to perpetuate this? We do have alternatives for population control, and they don't have to be just yanking out the ovaries and ripping out the testicles. There are alternatives.
well, and we've talked about this before, but the quote unquote old spay bitch, right? The female spay female that you were talking about, the hair coat changes, they
Oh,
gain the
yeah.
weight, they get quote unquote lazier. Just look at what happens to women who have hysterectomies. I'm speaking to you. Let me help you. I am an old spay bitch. It's
Me too.
it's
So
real, man.
it is. It is. And the coat changes,
Yes,
especially
yes,
in
it
the,
does.
yeah, like the double coated dogs. My corgis look completely different. Irish setters, golden retrievers. I can walk into an exam or walk into my lobby and go, spayed, spayed, neutered, spayed,
Yep.
intact. I can walk down the row and pick them out just based on their appearance. And if you think that I'm making that up, you go to a dog show someday and look at how the dogs at
Truth.
a dog show look. And it's not just how they're groomed, it is how they grow hair. It is the way that physiology works. So I have people that will leave them intact, hormonally intact, because they don't want to deal with the coat. I have people that keep them intact because they'll come in with an older female and say, I want to leave her ovaries. And I'm like, well, she's gotten her money's worth out of her ovaries from an orthopedic perspective. And they go, yeah, but I want her to sleep in the bed with me. This is my bed dog. And if she's incontinent, she can't be my bed dog.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, good reason to leave ovaries, man. We can have this conversation. So if she has mammary cancer, if she has ovarian pathology, the ovaries should come out. Otherwise, I'm telling you, you have that as an option if you can live with a dog with heat cycles. Most daycares and boarding facilities will not take them because they don't know how to manage sexual behaviors. They don't want to deal with the play groups. They don't want to deal with the behaviors. They just don't want. And again, it gets back to, we've been doing this since the 1970s. So, 50 years later, we have a whole generation, 2 generations of people that don't know how to manage those behaviors. So they haven't figured out how to set up the play groups that are appropriate. And they haven't figured out how to keep them in safe places. So I think that's really important. So if you have an intact dog in your life that your boyfriend, girlfriend, neighbor, friend, best friend, uncle, brother,
Cousins,
cousin,
uncles.
sister,
Yeah.
maybe it's not right for you, but maybe it's just twice a year that you keep them separated, and the other 5.5 months of the 6-month period of time, they can be happily playmates. So you have to look at your lifestyle, and I do try to make sure that we screen people appropriately, because I don't want them to leave ovaries and then later on have to go back and have them taken out. That's hard on the female to have a second surgery. So we have to be thoughtful about it. But with the right screening and with the right lifestyle, it can be, so many people work from home now. They're like, oh, I don't go to daycare anymore. It's good. I don't care if I go to the dog park 2 weeks out of the 6 months. I don't have to go to the dog park. I'm good. So I think those are really important things for people to understand, is that it has to be a lifestyle decision, and it has to be a veterinarian decision that you work with your veterinarian. And if they're not comfortable, find somebody that is. Go to the therio.org website. You're going to find information. Go to the Facebook page. You're going to find information. It's out there. There are alternatives for you if that's what you're seeking.
Excellent. And we will make sure to have lots of resources for you in the show notes and in the newsletter on this episode. So thanks, Marty. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Marty and Laura Show. We're excited to bring you these unique, fun, fact-based conversations about pet health. We hope you'll join us on social. Stop by the website to sign up for an extra tip of the week for your pet. While you're at it, do us a favor, please, and leave a review wherever you find your podcasts. The Marty and Laura Show is produced by Pure Dog Talk, Inc., sound design and editing by Premium Audio Services.